The morning sun had just begun to rise over the tall glass buildings of the busy city. The streets were slowly filling with people rushing to their offices, each one holding a phone in one hand and a bag in the other. Cars honked in the distance, bicycles weaved through traffic, and the air was filled with the mixed smell of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked bread from nearby cafes. In the middle of this lively street stood a small food truck, painted a faded blue. On its side, in hand-painted white letters, were the words, "Maria's Morning Bites." The letters had started to peel from years of use, but to Maria the food truck was more than just a vehicle. It was her world. It was her dream, her survival, and her burden all at once. Maria had been running the food truck for almost 3 years. Every day she woke up before dawn, prepared ingredients, and drove to her usual spot near the corner of a busy business district. By the time the office workers began arriving, she was already there with her little truck, ready to serve burritos, sandwiches, and steaming cups of coffee. The line in front of her food truck was always long. People loved her food because it was simple, fresh, and made with care. But behind her welcoming smile, Maria carried a heavy weight. The rent for her small apartment was overdue. Bills were piled up on her kitchen table. Her old truck broke down often, and each time it drained her savings. She had dreams of opening a small cafe one day, with proper chairs and tables where people could sit and enjoy her food slowly instead of rushing away with takeout boxes. But for now, that dream was hidden behind unpaid debts and the need to survive day by day. Maria was not the kind of person to complain. She smiled at every customer, remembered their names when she could, and even offered extra napkins to those she thought needed them. She moved fast inside the cramped space of the truck, her hands working like clockwork, cracking eggs, flipping tortillas, slicing avocados, pouring coffee. Her black hair was always tied back neatly, and though her apron was old and stained, she wore it with pride. That morning, the line was longer than usual. Office workers, students, and even delivery drivers waited patiently, some scrolling on their phones, others talking quietly to each other. Maria was in her usual rhythm, calling out, "Next, please," and handing over wrapped burritos with practiced speed. She hardly looked at faces anymore. To her, customers came and went so quickly, they blurred together. But among the crowd at the very end of the line stood a man who seemed different. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that stood out in the casual morning rush. His shoes were polished, his watch gleamed under the sunlight, and his posture was calm, confident. He didn't fidget with a phone like the others. Instead, he simply stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the line move forward slowly. Some people in line recognized him. They whispered to each other, stealing glances, trying to confirm if it was really him. His face was familiar, seen often in newspapers, magazines, and television interviews. But he remained quiet, blending into the crowd as if he were just another hungry customer. Maria, however, didn't notice him at all. She was too focused on her orders. "Here you go, Mr. Davis, extra cheese." "Just like always," she said to a regular customer with a warm smile. "Thanks, Maria, you're the best," the man replied, before hurrying away with his breakfast. The line moved forward. The smell of sizzling eggs and fresh coffee filled the air. Maria's hands never stopped moving, even as sweat formed on her forehead. She thought about how many more burritos she needed to sell today to cover at least one bill. She thought about her younger brother back home, who she still helped with school fees whenever she could. She thought about the dream cafe she had once drawn in a notebook, its design now faded, but never forgotten. And the man in the suit waited patiently, his eyes never leaving her. When the line grew shorter, Maria finally glanced up at him for just a second, but quickly looked away. To her, he was just another office worker in a suit. She had served many like him before. Her mind was too tired, too filled with worries to pay attention to details. Finally, it was his turn. He stepped forward, and his presence seemed to change the air around the truck. Some people who were leaving turned their heads again, curious to see how Maria would react. Maria didn't notice their stares. She simply asked in her usual quick tone, "Good morning. What can I get for you today?" The man smiled softly, his voice calm and low. "A black coffee, no sugar, and your breakfast burrito just like old times." Maria paused for a split second. There was something in his voice that felt strangely familiar, like a distant memory knocking on her heart, but she brushed it aside. She handed him his coffee, wrapped the burrito, and placed it on the counter. "That'll be $7, she said without looking directly at him. He paid without hesitation, his hand steady, his eyes still watching her closely. But Maria had already turned to the next customer, moving on with her routine. The man didn't leave right away. He stood to the side, sipping his coffee slowly as if waiting for something. But Maria never looked back. To her, he was just another customer, just another face in the long line. Yet in that quiet moment, the man knew something Maria didn't. He knew her. He remembered her. He remembered the girl from years ago who used to stand on a street corner, selling homemade lemonade with determination in her eyes. He remembered the laughter they had shared in a dusty park, the dreams they once talked about under the evening sky. She had not recognized him yet. But he was certain she would, and when she did, everything would change. The city had already grown louder by the time Maria's morning rush began to slow down. Delivery trucks honked as they squeezed through narrow streets. Bicycles brushed past pedestrians, and office doors opened with the steady stream of people heading to their desks. For Maria, the busiest part of the day was over. She finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She leaned back against the counter inside her little food truck and wiped her hands on her apron. Her arms ached from constant work, and a dull tiredness spread through her shoulders. Yet she felt a small sense of satisfaction. She had sold nearly all the burritos she had prepared that morning. Every day was a battle, but small victories like this kept her going. Outside, a few customers remained, finishing their food on nearby benches or walking slowly toward the subway station. Among them, the man in the suit was still standing, sipping his coffee as if he had nowhere else to be. Maria noticed him again. It struck her as unusual. Most customers rushed off the moment they got their order. This man, however, seemed comfortable taking his time. His calmness stood out in a city that never seemed to pause. She tried not to pay him too much attention. After all, people were free to eat or drink however they liked. But something about him unsettled her. Not in a bad way, more in a way that made her curious. The man in the suit had a name that many across the country knew. Michael Jordan. To the world, he was the successful CEO of a sports company that had grown from a small startup into a global empire. His story was told in magazines, interviews, and documentaries. People admired his confidence, his discipline, and his natural leadership. He was a symbol of success, but to Michael, all of that meant little at this moment. As he stood near Maria's food truck, holding a simple paper cup of coffee, he wasn't thinking about board meetings, investors, or luxury offices. He was thinking about the girl inside the faded blue truck. He had not seen her in years. Yet the memory of her had never left him. As a child, Michael had grown up in a modest neighborhood where life wasn't always easy. He remembered evenings playing basketball on cracked courts, where the hoops had no nets and the streetlights flickered. He remembered how Maria was always nearby, selling lemonade or homemade cookies, saving every coin she earned. She wasn't rich, but she was strong, always working, always smiling, even when life tested her. Back then, Michael admired her determination. She had dreams of owning her own cafe, and she spoke about it with such certainty that he believed she would one day achieve it. Even as kids, Maria carried a quiet strength that inspired others. Now, seeing her behind the counter of a small food truck, he realized just how little had changed. She was still working, still smiling for her customers, still giving her best in the face of challenges, and Michael couldn't help but feel both proud and saddened. Proud because Maria had built something with her own hands, saddened because he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her shoulders drooped when she thought no one was looking. Life had not been kind, but she had kept going. Inside the truck, Maria tried to shake off the strange feeling she had when she heard his voice earlier. Something about the way he ordered, just like old times, echoed in her mind. But she quickly told herself it was nothing. Customers sometimes spoke in unusual ways. Maybe he was just being polite, or maybe she had misheard him. She busied herself with cleaning, wiping down the counters, and refilling the napkin dispenser. Still, her thoughts returned to the man outside. Why was he still here? Why did his presence feel different from everyone else? And why did his voice sound familiar even though she couldn't place it? Maria shook her head. She didn't have time for such thoughts. She needed to focus on the food truck, on the next shift, on the bills waiting at home. Curiosity wouldn't pay rent. From his spot near the bench, Michael continued to watch Maria with quiet eyes. He didn't want to rush her recognition. Part of him even enjoyed the fact that she hadn't recognized him yet. To the rest of the world, he was a CEO, a businessman who carried the weight of an empire. People looked at him with awe or expectation, but Maria, she looked at him like he was nobody special. For the first time in years, he felt ordinary, and he liked it. He sipped his coffee slowly, the taste plain compared to the expensive brews he was used to. But to him it was perfect because it came from her. A small exchange. Eventually, Maria stepped out of the truck to stretch her legs. She noticed the man still sitting there. Their eyes met briefly. She gave a polite smile, the kind she gave to all customers, and said, "I hope the coffee's okay." The man smiled back, his expression warm. "It's better than I remembered." Maria tilted her head slightly. "Remembered?" He chuckled softly. "Yes, I used to drink coffee like this a long time ago. Simple, no sugar, no cream. Just like yours." His words stirred something inside her again. There it was, that feeling of familiarity. She almost asked him if they had met before, but stopped herself. She didn't want to sound foolish. He was just a stranger in a suit, after all. "Glad you like it," she replied, brushing her apron. "I try my best." He nodded, his eyes thoughtful as if he wanted to say more. But instead, he simply finished his coffee and stood. Maria expected him to leave then, to disappear into the busy street like everyone else. But before he walked away, he placed the empty cup back on her counter and said, "See you tomorrow, Maria." Her heart skipped a beat. He knew her name. Of course, her name was written on the side of the food truck, Maria's Morning Bites. Any customer could have read it. Still, the way he said it felt different. It was gentle, familiar, almost like the way an old friend would say it. She nodded quickly, hiding her confusion with another polite smile. "See you tomorrow," she replied. And with that, the man walked away, his figure blending into the crowd. As she closed her truck that afternoon, Maria found herself thinking about him again. It wasn't unusual for customers to return day after day. Many of her regulars did. But something about this man was different. Who was he? Why did he seem to know her? And why did she feel like she should know him too? That night, as she counted the money she had earned, Maria's mind wandered. She didn't recognize the man as the powerful CEO that others admired. To her, he was still a mystery, a stranger with kind eyes and a voice that stirred old memories she couldn't yet recall. But deep down, a small spark of curiosity had already taken root in her heart. And though she didn't realize it yet, her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The next morning came as it always did for Maria. Her alarm rang at 4:30, the sound sharp and cold in her small apartment. She sat up slowly, rubbing her tired eyes, and reminded herself that she had no time to waste. The food truck needed to be ready before the first wave of office workers filled the street. She dressed in her faded jeans and a clean but worn apron, tied her hair back, and packed the fresh ingredients she had prepared the night before. Every day was the same routine: eggs, tortillas, cheese, beans, vegetables, and of course, coffee grounds. Each item was carefully placed inside her boxes. By the time she drove her little truck into the city, the sky was still gray. The tall buildings glowed with early lights, and the street was quiet except for delivery vans unloading their goods. Maria parked in her usual spot and began setting up, her mind still half asleep but her hands moving quickly out of habit. She tried not to think about the man from yesterday, but the memory of his face lingered in her mind. His calm eyes, the gentle way he said her name, and the strange feeling of familiarity. It had all stayed with her long after she had closed her truck. She even dreamed about it during the night, though she couldn't remember the details clearly when she woke. As the morning grew brighter, the street filled with its usual rush. A line formed in front of her food truck once again, people chattering, phones buzzing, voices overlapping. Maria kept her focus on the orders, her smile in place, her hands working without pause. Then she saw him, the man in the suit. He stood in line again, just as calm as before, his tall figure impossible to miss. Others in line stole glances at him, whispering among themselves, but he paid them no attention. His eyes were fixed on the truck, on her. Maria felt her stomach tighten for reasons she couldn't explain. She quickly lowered her gaze and concentrated on the burrito she was wrapping. When it was his turn, she greeted him the same way she greeted everyone. "Good morning. What can I get for you today?" He smiled, that same quiet smile, and replied, "A black coffee, no sugar, and a breakfast burrito just like yesterday." Maria nodded, preparing his order. She tried not to meet his eyes, afraid of the strange feeling that rose in her chest when she did. She handed him the coffee, wrapped the burrito, and placed it in front of him. "That'll be $7, she said softly. He paid, but instead of leaving right away, he leaned slightly closer. His voice dropped low, gentle but firm. "Still remember me?" he whispered. Maria froze. The words hit her like a sudden breeze, stirring memories she didn't know were still alive. She lifted her eyes slowly and looked at him, really looked at him this time. The sharp jawline, the deep eyes, the way he carried himself, it was all different from the boy she once knew. Yet hidden beneath the suit and the years, there was something familiar. Something she couldn't ignore. Her heart beat faster. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The man smiled slightly, as if he knew her confusion. He didn't push her to answer, didn't say more. He simply took his food, gave her a nod, and stepped aside. Maria's hands shook as she turned back to her work. The line of customers behind him was waiting, but her mind was far away. "Still remember me?" The question echoed in her thoughts again and again. That night, when Maria finally returned home, she sat at her small kitchen table, the day's earnings spread in front of her. But for once, she wasn't thinking about money. She was thinking about him. She searched her memory, going back to her childhood, back to the neighborhood where she grew up. She remembered long summer afternoons when kids gathered in the park to play basketball. She remembered selling lemonade on the corner, saving every coin in a glass jar. She remembered the boy who always stopped by, teasing her for charging 25 cents but still buying a cup every time. His name was Michael. Could it be the same Michael? The boy who dreamed of making it big one day? The one who promised he would never forget her? Maria shook her head. It seemed impossible. That boy had been from the same struggling neighborhood as her. The man she saw now wore expensive suits and carried himself with the confidence of someone important. But the way he whispered, the way his eyes looked at her, it was the same. Maria hardly slept that night. When her alarm rang again, she felt even more tired than before. But she pushed herself to get up, prepare, and drive the truck to her usual spot. This time, she couldn't help but look for him as she served her customers. Every time the line grew, she wondered if he would appear. And then he did. Once again, he stood calmly at the end of the line, waiting patiently, as though he had all the time in the world. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she prepared orders for others. Her heart pounded faster the closer he came. When he finally stepped up to the counter, she met his eyes. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning, Maria," he replied, his voice warm. This time, she didn't ask him what he wanted. "Black coffee, no sugar. Breakfast burrito," she said, almost like a memory she had just rediscovered. He smiled, clearly pleased. "You do remember." Maria handed him the coffee, her hands shaking just slightly. Are you the Michael I knew? From the neighborhood?" His smile widened, his eyes lighting up. "Yes, I was hoping you'd recognize me." Maria felt her knees weaken. She gripped the counter to steady herself. "It can't be," she whispered.
"Michael."
"You've changed so much," he chuckled softly. "So have you. But I'd know you anywhere, Maria. You're still the same girl who worked harder than anyone else I knew, always smiling, always dreaming." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. She quickly turned away, pretending to adjust something on the shelf behind her. "I never thought I'd see you again." "I never forgot you," he said gently. "I've been back in the city for a while. I heard about a little food truck with amazing burritos. I had to see if it was really you." Maria's heart raced. She wanted to ask him 100 questions, where he had been, what he had done, how he had become the man he was now. But the line of customers behind him forced her to stay quiet. "Come back later," she whispered. "When it's less busy, please." He nodded, his smile calm. "I will." And as he walked away, Maria realized that her life had just shifted. The past she thought was long gone had suddenly returned, standing right in front of her. That night she lay awake again, her thoughts full of Michael. The boy she once knew was now a man admired by many, but to her, he was still the same friend from the neighborhood. The one who once said he believed in her dreams, and now, he was back in her world, back in her story. And she didn't know whether to feel afraid or hopeful. The afternoon sun was sinking low, painting the glass towers in shades of gold and orange. Maria wiped her forehead with the back of her hand as she closed the window of her food truck. The busiest hours were over, and the street had grown quieter. People hurried past, heading home or to evening classes, but the long line that had filled her morning was gone. Maria sighed in relief. Her back ached and her feet felt heavy, but there was still work to be done. Cleaning, organizing, preparing for tomorrow. She tied her apron tighter and reached for a stack of containers when a shadow fell across her counter. She looked up. It was him, Michael. He stood there, no longer part of a crowd but alone, his expression calm yet warm. His suit still looked perfect despite the day's hours, and his eyes seemed to hold a mixture of patience and hope. "You asked me to come back later," he said softly. "So here I am." For a moment Maria froze. All day she had been waiting for this moment, but now that it had arrived she felt unprepared. Her heart raced, her thoughts scattered. She forced a small smile. "I didn't think you'd really come back." Michael chuckled gently. "Maria, you should know by now, I keep my promises." Sitting down together, Maria hesitated before unlocking the side door of her food truck and stepping outside. She gestured toward a nearby bench under a tree, and they walked there together. For a while neither spoke. The sound of traffic and the cool evening wind filled the silence. Finally Maria broke it. "It feels strange seeing you again after all these years." "I know," Michael replied. "When I first saw you at the truck I couldn't believe it either. But then, it felt like nothing had changed." Maria laughed quietly, though her voice carried a hint of sadness. "Everything has changed, Michael. Look at you. You're successful, important. And look at me, I'm still here running a food truck fighting just to pay rent." Michael turned toward her, his eyes steady. "Maria, don't say it like that. You've built something with your own hands. You've kept going, even when life made it hard. That's not small. That's strength." For a moment they both drifted into silence, their minds traveling back to the past. "Do you remember the park?" Maria asked softly. "Where you used to play basketball until it got dark?" Michael smiled. "How could I forget? The court with the cracked ground and the broken hoop, and you always sitting nearby with your little lemonade stand." Maria chuckled. "That stand barely made any money, but you always bought a cup even when you didn't have much." "I didn't buy it for the lemonade," Michael admitted with a grin. "I bought it because you worked so hard for it. You inspired me, Maria. Even as kids, you had this determination in your eyes. You made me believe I could achieve my own dreams." Maria felt her throat tighten. "Dreams," she repeated softly. "I used to dream about opening a cafe. A real one. With tables, chairs, a menu, maybe even a little stage for music. But life had other plans." Her voice grew quieter. "My father got sick. My mother needed help. My younger brother needed money for school. I gave up my college plans so I could work. The food truck was all I could afford. It was the only way I could keep everything together." Michael listened carefully, his expression serious. He didn't interrupt her. "I don't regret helping my family," Maria continued. "But sometimes I wonder, what if I had been selfish? What if I had followed my own path instead of carrying everyone else's weight?" Her eyes glistened, though she quickly blinked back the tears. "Now I'm stuck. Every day feels the same. Wake up, cook, serve, clean, sleep. I survive, but I don't live, and the dream of that cafe feels further away than ever." Michael's chest tightened as he listened. He had read countless business reports, heard stories of hardship, but nothing struck him as deeply as Maria's words. She wasn't complaining. She was simply telling her truth. "You've done more than survive, Maria," he said firmly. "You've shown courage. You've proven that no matter how hard life gets, you won't give up. That's more than most people can say." Maria looked at him carefully. "And what about you? How did you get here? How did the boy from the old neighborhood become this?" Michael leaned back on the bench, his gaze distant. "It wasn't easy. After I left for college, I worked harder than I ever thought I could. I studied, I trained, I built connections. But more than anything, I kept remembering the promises I made to myself when I was young. I wanted to build something big, something meaningful." He smiled faintly. "And every time I felt like quitting, I remembered you. I remembered how you never stopped working, no matter how small the task was. That memory kept me moving forward." Maria's breath caught. "You remembered me?" "All these years?" "Always," he said simply. You were a part of the reason I believed in myself." Maria turned her face away, overwhelmed. Part of her wanted to believe him, to accept that she had been remembered, valued, even when life had been unkind to her. But another part of her resisted. "You don't understand, Michael," she said softly. "You live in a different world now. You have wealth, success, power, and me? I'm just a woman running a truck. We're not the same anymore." Michael leaned forward, his voice steady. "Maria, don't compare our lives like that. Success isn't only about money or fame. It's about staying true to who you are, and you've done that. You've kept your heart strong, even when life tried to break it. That matters." Her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hide. For years she had carried her burdens alone. For years she had smiled while her heart grew heavier. And now, sitting on a bench with someone from her past, she felt seen for the first time in a long while. As the evening grew cooler, Michael finally stood. "Maria, I won't pretend I know everything about your struggles. But I know this. You're stronger than you think. And your dreams. They're not gone. They're just waiting." Maria looked at him, confused. "Waiting for what?" "For the right time," Michael said softly. "And maybe for the right people to believe in them with you." He placed a gentle hand on the back of the bench, then stepped away, his tall figure blending into the busy street once more. Maria sat there, her heart racing, her thoughts tangled. She didn't fully understand what he meant, but his words clung to her like sunlight breaking through a storm. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she thought she had lost: hope. The next morning, Maria woke earlier than usual. The memory of her conversation with Michael stayed fresh in her mind, as if his words had followed her into her dreams. She sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at her notebook where she once drew plans for a cafe. The drawings were old, the paper worn, the ink faded. She traced the lines with her fingers, remembering how alive she had felt when she first sketched them years ago. A cafe with wide windows, wooden chairs, soft lights, and a little shelf of books for people to enjoy. She had wanted it to be more than just a place to eat. She had wanted it to feel like home for anyone who walked inside. But the notebook had been pushed aside when life grew heavy. Now, after meeting Michael again, the dream didn't feel so far away anymore. It still seemed impossible, yes, but his words had planted something inside her, a spark. When she drove her faded blue truck to the city, the air felt different. The sun was bright, the morning cool, and Maria noticed small details she usually ignored: the way birds rested on the streetlights, the laughter of a child walking with his father, the golden reflection of light on the windows of tall buildings. She parked in her usual spot, set up her supplies, and opened the serving window. The familiar line soon formed. Maria worked quickly, handing out burritos and coffee, but today her smile felt lighter. She still had her worries: rent, bills, exhaustion, but for once they didn't seem as heavy. Every few minutes she looked at the line, half expecting to see Michael again. But he didn't appear. When the morning rush ended, she felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Part of her wanted him to show up, to continue the conversation they had started. Another part of her wondered if maybe he had already moved on, his busy life calling him elsewhere. She shook her head and told herself not to expect too much. After all, he was Michael Jordan, the CEO everyone admired. Why would someone like him keep returning to her small food truck? By late afternoon, the street had grown quieter. Maria wiped her counters clean, stacked her containers, and prepared to close for the day. That was when she noticed something taped carefully to the side of her truck, near the window. It was a plain white envelope. Maria frowned and pulled it off gently. Her name was written on the front in neat handwriting: Maria. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, she found a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it and began to read. "Dreams don't expire. Let's build them again, together." "Michael," Maria gasped softly. Her eyes widened and her heart pounded. She read the words again and again, unable to believe them. Tucked inside the envelope was also a small business card with his name and direct phone number printed neatly. Her hand shook as she held it. The card wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a door, a chance, a possibility. Maria sat down on the small stool inside her truck, holding the note against her chest. For so long she had carried her burdens alone. For so long she had told herself she wasn't allowed to hope for more, that dreams were luxuries for people who didn't have bills and struggles. And yet here was Michael, reminding her that dreams were not lost, that they could still be built, no matter how many years had passed. Tears welled in her eyes, falling softly onto the envelope in her hands. But these weren't the tears of exhaustion she had cried before. These were tears of something she hadn't felt in years: joy, gratitude, and hope. That night, Maria didn't rush to her bed out of tiredness. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table again, the note lying open beside her old notebook of cafe drawings. She picked up a pen, something she hadn't done in years, and began sketching new ideas. This time, she wasn't drawing with sadness or regret. She was drawing with renewed energy. She imagined the cafe she had once dreamed of, but bigger, brighter, filled with possibilities. She imagined people smiling as they enjoyed her food, families gathering at her tables, friends laughing over cups of coffee. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream freely. Across the city, in his tall office building, Michael sat at his desk late into the night. His phone buzzed with emails and calls, his calendar filled with meetings. But his mind wasn't on business. It was on Maria. He remembered the look in her eyes when she finally recognized him, the way her voice trembled as she spoke of her struggles. He had seen many people chase wealth and success, but very few carried the kind of heart Maria did. She had never given up, even when life pushed her down. To Michael, helping her wasn't charity, it was respect. It was gratitude. It was giving back to the girl who once inspired him when he had nothing. The following morning, Maria returned to her truck with the envelope tucked carefully in her bag. She hadn't yet called the number on the card. She was nervous, uncertain, afraid it might be too good to be true. But just knowing it was there gave her strength. Her customers noticed her brighter smile that day. Some even commented, "Maria, you look happier today," without knowing why. She simply nodded and said, "Maybe I am." She thought about calling Michael that evening or the next day or the day after. She didn't want to rush. She wanted to be sure she was ready, but deep down she knew one thing. Her life had already changed, not because of money, not because of promises, but because someone had reminded her that she still mattered, that her dreams still mattered. As she closed her food truck that night, Maria looked up at the darkening sky. She thought about the first time he had whispered those words, "Still remember me." At the time she had been shocked, confused, almost afraid. But now those words had become her strength. She remembered not only him, but also herself. The girl who once believed in dreams, the girl who never gave up, the girl who still lived inside her. Maria smiled softly and whispered to herself, "Yes, I remember, and I will not forget again." In the weeks that followed, Maria continued running her food truck, but everything felt different. She worked with renewed energy, her heart lighter. She knew challenges would still come, but now she carried hope with her. And on her counter, next to the napkin holder, she kept Michael's note. Customers often asked about it, and she simply smiled, saying, "It's a reminder that dreams don't expire." She hadn't yet told anyone what the future held. She hadn't yet shared the full story of the man in the suit who waited in her line, but in her heart, she knew this was only the beginning. The food truck girl was no longer just surviving. She was ready to live.